Get started right away. Again, if you haven't opened it already, the link to the outline is in the calendar invite, so we'll be going to that here in a minute. And all of you should be new math or computer science tutors starting either in interim or spring. We had a couple of you join us at the end of fall, but most of you have been hired recently at the end of fall to tutor in interim or spring. And I usually do this tutor training twice a year with new tutors. And this is specific to everybody who's in math and CS, because you've hopefully received information from Vicki in the Ask office about tutor training. If you're in interim, you hopefully already received all of that information. If you're in spring, sounds like she's going to be sending that later in January to you all, because the other disciplines are still in the process of hiring, and so she wants to do that in one fell swoop. But it's basically some information about some online tutoring that you will do just kind of independently on your own by going through some resources on their Ask Moodle website. We also have some tutor training that we do that's more of a logistical nature. We do talk a little bit about some of the things that we're going to talk about today in terms of more kind of the overview about tutoring with attitudes and things like that in these other meetings as well. And we'll put some little training moments throughout the semester. So there will be startup meetings for Math Lab or CS Lab if you're taking part in those this spring. That will happen right at the beginning of the semester. Those kind of get mainly at the logistics, like how do I use answer keys? Where are those? What is a course folder? All of the things about name tags and just all the materials that we use to do Math Lab and CS Lab. So if you're tutoring in interim, we had kind of a crash course version of that we did at the end of December. If you're tutoring for spring, we'll do more of a meeting all together with all the tutors where we'll go through those things. And if you know anything about tutoring this year, just like everything else, it's been different. And so we've had to modify as we go. We've learned a lot as we've gone as well, and we've changed things. And we're providing our tutoring in a hybrid format. When we did that very quickly last spring, if you look at the historical attendance, you would see this incredible dive off the deep end where our attendance went to nothing, basically. And so it's really nice to see that with a more thoughtful approach this fall, we've been able to kind of really meet that gap now that we've been able to also give kind of in a safe manner a face-to-face approach as well. Our numbers have come back up, and we did really quite well and had a really strong fall semester and had the highest attendance of any of the other labs. So you might know the Ask office is over all these other services for like the science sessions, the business lab, all of those, and MathCS, that area is kind of the biggest of any of these, and it's had the largest attendance. And we went up to that this fall again and recovered some of our attendance figures. But that took a lot of work. It took a lot of changes, and you all will become a part of that. Even just yesterday, Anna, who's there, she's kind of more listening today. She's an experienced veteran, so you can talk to her. She's one of our managers for MathCS Lab. We actually have two managers that are experienced. So Anna, who's here with us today, kind of helping, she can speak up if she ever thinks of something that might be helpful. She's also listening to me do this to see how we can improve it for the future. Anything I miss. And then we also have Grace Ford, who is another one of our tutors that's going to be graduating. So she's going to be student teaching this spring, so she will no longer be with us. So we've hired two new managers who are fresh at it. So Ruth, you can wave, she's one of them. She's coming in and kind of an understudy to Grace and learning about it as well. And then Naomi, who I hope might join us, is our other new tutor, who is also going to be coming or has jumped right into the role as well of managing also. So those people are going to be resources for us as well, and they have helped us in modifying what we do and how we do it. But each one of you can do that. We've had tutors that really rise up and say, hey, I think this is going to work better. And that's been super helpful. So you're going to learn a lot as you go and just as you tutor. And so as you continue to tutor, you'll become better tutors. You also will help us to improve our services. So I say that right off the bat, just so that you have confidence in your tutoring. You're all good students and you can be good tutors. I know it can be daunting as you start into tutoring and feel like, oh my word, I don't know what's going to happen today. You know, anybody could come walking through those doors, have any kind of questions. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But you're great students. You've got a lot of insights. You've got a lot of creativity. So speak up, let us know how we can improve our services. Anna and I even just talked yesterday, and Ruth, you don't even know about some of these changes. I'm going to be sending out some changes even today that we determined yesterday afternoon. So it's a real dynamic system that we've got here that is changing and trying to improve, because our ultimate goal is really to serve students well. That's really at the really front of things. We developed a mantra last fall to kind of get us through. I kind of came to this at the beginning. We had worked pretty much all through the summer trying to figure out all the logistics of what we were going to do. And I had kind of come to this moment where I was really overwhelmed with everything. I was just like, oh my goodness, how are we going to do this? How are students going to be able to do hybrid tutoring with both people in the room and people on Zoom? And we were trying to figure out how we're going to make our attendance app work, all kinds of things. There's Naomi. And so I was kind of overwhelmed with the logistics, and I had to kind of have one of those recentering moments that you probably had in your life, where you just kind of say, okay, let's just throw everything out. Let's come back to our core and our center and what we're supposed to be doing. And I came up with this GGSS, glorify God and serve students. So if you ever see the GGSS, and some of the tutors even throw that around and they'll throw it back to me, and it kind of recenters me as well. It kind of brings you back to the center, which really is, am I glorifying God and am I serving students well? Those things are really at the core of everything that we want to do. Everything else is just kind of vehicles to try to do that well. And that's what I'm going to try to do with you today, is to try to talk through some of the more theoretical aspects of tutoring in math and computer science and how you can be a better tutor. So, but again, keep that at the center. Recognize that your ultimate goal is to glorify God and serve students well. And if you keep that at the center, you're going to do well, and you're going to help us to improve our services so that we'll do even better. Okay, long intro. So Naomi joined us. Wave, Naomi, I introduced you. She's again one of the new managers. So I'm going to share screen with you on that outline, and we're going to go through those pieces together. And I will just kind of highlight where I'm at as we go through, so you can kind of keep up with where we're at. So again, I do this training both in the fall and in interim, for interim and spring. So normally I do it a little ways in. Interim, we don't have that long to wait because interim goes so fast. So I do this tutoring more quickly into it. So usually it's like 2 weeks into the semester that I do this training. And so I love that then, because usually everybody has done some tutoring. However, that's not the case. I think, what is it, only Julia, Naomi, and Ruth, I think you're the only people who have even tutored. Have any of you, like, hold up your fingers, have you worked with 1 student, 0 students, or 2 students? How many students have you worked with so far? 0, 1, 0. Okay. I was encouraged last night. They had a huge, relatively huge, I think it was like 6 in the intro to programming session, and couple in each of the other ones. So that's good. We do have a slow start at interim. So you don't have much of a reaction though, so I'm not going to get your reaction yet. But later on, I'll be interested to hear how things go. And again, I do want to hear your reactions, your insights, and things like that. I actually have that at the end of the handout. You'll see at the very end, I'll just start with that. We invite your feedback and ideas. you have a fresh perspective and possibly viewed our labs as a student. So some of you may have come to either Math or CS lab as a student as well. Those are really great insights too. You've seen it firsthand then. Speak up if you've ever seen something that doesn't work or you have an idea for how we could do it better. We were, like I said, learning all last fall, especially with ways to use Zoom and different things like that. I'm going to send out some information to the interim tutors today. I sent some things out to the intro tutors yesterday. And so we're learning all the time. But if you have some insights, please pass them along to me. The next section is all about resources. And this is just for you to remember, you've got all these different resources that you're not just kind of going in there on your own, that you've got a lot of resources that you can either use or recognize that are available and seek help with those. First, there's going to be, again, a stronger training for those of you going into spring semester, where we'll go through in a little bit more detail, all of the details about all of the logistics. There's things like a checklist that's a core document that can help you to kind of understand all of the logistics of how to like run a session these days in hybrid mode. There is the resource of having course folders where you have all kinds of availability of materials from the prof. We hope with our course contacts that we've developed that we will be starting to make those course folders really rich places where there's not only a textbook, an electronic textbook and electronic answer keys, but also where you can interact with students. So in that course folder, you could make a Jamboard, for example, that will be shared with the whole class. I hope that we'll maybe even start some like tutor bulletin boards there where you can start to talk to one another, because each course that we tutor is very different in how you tutor it. So there's going to be some things that you're going to learn from one another who are tutoring that same course. So I hope those course folders will become really kind of active places where our course contacts will be placing things and profs will be as well. If you work for interim, I'm going to be telling you about that a little bit more in an email I'm going to send later today. And then you'll learn about that if you're there in spring as well. But go into the course folder, make sure you know your way around it, how to use a textbook, how to use an answer key, and anything else that might appear in the course folder. The professor, don't forget that the professors, you know, they are that's why they teach, right? They're very interested in their students. They really want them to learn. And so they are a great resource for you as well. Don't forget that they're there kind of in the shadows. And some of them literally are kind of like that. You know, you probably know, it used to be Dr. E. Gossett, who just retired, that had the most trigger. He was like there, if you emailed him, his emails would come back like so incredibly fast. And Gossett is pretty much like that as well. And so you will find that there'll be profs who are more than willing to help you. So even if you get stuck within a lab, you know, don't be bugging the prof all the time, like every single time you have a question, for example. But if you're all stuck and all the tutors don't know what's going on, feel free to shoot them an email to just say, hey, we're all stuck on this. Can you give us any insight or whatever? And often you will hear back within a session from that prof about it. Also follow up at the end of the session so that's going to help students even know that you're really talking with the prof and interacting with the prof, and they'll think that it's more of a useful experience and that you really cared about them to take that next step. So for example, if you were all working on a program or a problem in a session and got stuck at the end, you couldn't get a hold of the prof during the session, you worked with some other tutors, you used all these other resources and tried these things. And in the very end, you were just kind of like, this is really odd. We don't know what you meant. Maybe it was a problem they made up, or you didn't quite know what they were asking for, what this program is supposed to do. At the very end, email the prof and tell them about that. And maybe tell them even which students were there that you were working with, because that's really helpful. The prof knows then that they can talk with those students and help them with that issue. And the student knows that you cared enough to kind of make that connection with the prof as well. So email them, give them the context like I'm a math lab tutor, or I'm a CS lab tutor, and I worked with these students, or I'm individually tutoring. That's why this training is supposed to cover both working in a lab setting and also working individually with students. So if you're working individually with a student as well, feel free to reach out to the professor. We'll talk more about that in a minute. The lead tutor, note that they're a resource as well. Lead tutors is something that we just implemented yesterday. Again, in the past, we've always had lead tutors. We've had to disperse our services due to COVID. So we have it in several rooms. So we have things like room managers, but now we are coming back to having some lead tutors. Lead tutors generally are people who have tutored for a while before. So they've got some experiences in tutoring and have seen a bunch of different things. So use them as well and kind of watch them. I've heard that over and over from tutors, that that's the best way that they learned how to tutor, is watching other people tutor and seeing how they did it and how they interacted with students. So watch how other experienced tutors work with other students. This next one, MathCS lab, this is mainly there so you remember to not forget, if you're working individually with a student, to use both of those resources in tandem. We won't even give a student an individual tutor unless they have tried MathLab or CS Lab for a while and they found that that's not enough help. There's a lot of other things that go into that decision, including the prof has to agree that that's a good idea for that student. But when an individual tutoring link up is made, sometimes that tutor or that student just stops going to MathLab or CS Lab. Don't let that happen. Encourage them to use both of those resources. They can be going to MathLab or CS Lab to get some more help with like programming syntax or, or maybe their homework problems, and they can be using you for bigger ideas. So they can be using you for going through a concept and trying to figure out, what does that particular concept mean? And how can I think about that a little bit more deeply? So make sure that you're talking with them about the use of both MathLab and CS Lab and encouraging them to use both of those resources together. A lot of times, if you say, I'm working on Monday nights, come see me then, that will be the way to get them into MathLab or CS Lab. And then you can encourage them to also be using it at other points during the week. Excuse me. Alex is something just for you to keep in the back of your mind. This is mainly if you tutor anybody who is in Math for Allied 1, Pre-Calc or Calc 1. This is something that we have available. It's an online remediation courses for each of those courses. This, you probably mainly have this happen in Pre-Calc or Calc 1. And just remember that that resource exists, because what it is it's a kind of a smart learning course that you do an assessment at the beginning, and then they create a course just for you to help you to remediate on certain concepts that are important for those two courses. So someone can be in pre-calc and be taking the prep for pre-calc course, or they can be in calculus and be taking the prep calculus course. So just be aware that those exist. Those are really helpful for if, for example, you're working with a calc student and you see, wow, your trig is real lacking, or wow, you really don't know what a log is or an exponent is, or your algebra skills are pretty poor. If you have somebody like that, feel free to reach out to me. I just want you to keep this in the back of your mind, and you don't have to know any more logistical details about it. Just know that that exists. And if there's a student that you think that would work well with, just connect with me and I can help you get the student connected up with that. Which leads into the next resource is me. Feel free to email me if you have something weird come up. It always surprises me. I've been doing this for many years. I forget how old MathLab is now, probably 25 years old at least. Probably more than that. But anyways, I'm amazed that there's even new things that come up, new problems, new issues, new things. You know, this year has had lots of new things. But you in particular might come up with one particularly hard student or different situation that's never come up before. You haven't had any training, a lead tutor doesn't know about it. Don't forget to reach out to me if you have any concerns, or if I can help you to link up with somebody else, or you have an interesting student that we need to figure out what is a better way to interact with that student. So don't forget to use me as a resource. And the last resource is the Ask Office. be aware that the Ask Office has both counselors available for the students that you're working with. Sometimes the student you're working with has no problem with being able to understand. They're a really bright student, you know, they can get things really quickly. But this is a student that bugs me the most. You know, they're really bright, they can get it quickly, but they're just not studying, okay? And they're not putting in the effort. They have really bad study skills, okay? So somebody like that, if you recognize something like that, refer them to one of these two ways, either that they go in and see an Ask counselor, because that could be the best way, that they just talk one-on-one with somebody about study skills, time management, all kinds of things like that, test taking. So that's another one that's a common one that comes up. You've been working with a student, they seem like they're really doing great, and they come back and say, oh my word, I failed this test. You're like, what? You were really tracking with me, come on, what happened? And so maybe they have some test taking issues. Best thing is to refer them to the Ask Office, tell them to go see Vicki Sanford, who you've been interacting with for tutoring needs. She's also sits right inside the door there, or they can reach them through email as well, through the website, to set up an appointment to meet with a counselor. That's really the best way. If they're a little bit more timid and they're just like, no, point them to some of these resources as well. So there's online materials as well that they can just look at. There's an assessment, for example, online about their study skills that they could go through. And there's several things online about test taking and other things that they can read, a few videos that they can watch and things like that. So just be aware that all of that exists, and that may become one of the things that you need to either share with a student or encourage them to use. Preparation, this is just talking about how you can prepare and how the student should be prepared. So you as a tutor, for Math Lab, you're doing the preparing right now. For CS Lab, you're doing the preparing right now. You can't do a lot of preparation for those because people are going to be coming in. You can do some things like looking at the syllabus. All the syllabi are in the course folders, reading things from course contacts if they send you information about what's going on in the course. But beyond that, there's not a lot you can do to prepare. However, for individual tutoring, there is a little bit that you can do to prepare. One of the things is to email the student's prof. And this is a question I'll ask you. If you do have an individual link up, you'll have to come and talk with me. So I always ask, have you connected with the prof? And probably about 50% of the people forget to do that. So don't forget to do that. Just again, because the prof is a really good resource. They've seen the student and what's going on in the class. They can help you to understand, oh, you know, I've seen this as an issue with that student, or I would really recommend that you work on this with that student. Or they might say, you know, we've really got this project coming up. That's really where you should put your energy. The student really needs to be putting their energy into this program or whatever. So connect with the prof right away if you get a link up with an individual student, so that you can find out what would be the best way to tutor that student. If you get an individual link up, there's also a link here to a document that has a whole bunch of other information. So I'm not going to go to that now. Some of you won't even get an individual link up, but if you do get an individual link up, go there, or go there now, print it out, just have it there available for in the future. If you do get an individual link up for some tips that you can do to prepare and to have a successful one-on-one tutoring experience. We talk about you being prepared, but we also want to remind you that we expect the student to be prepared as well. Bethel is a little bit unusual in that everything that we offer the students is free. If they were at the U of M, for example, they would pay big bucks to get a tutor, or other places. So sometimes, since it is free and they're not paying for it, they kind of abuse that maybe, and aren't utilizing those resources as they should, as this really great commodity that you are. But we do hold them accountable for that. Anytime a student is linked up individually with a tutor, the Ask counselors meet with them and they go through some guidelines with them. That I believe they'll probably give to you in that tutor training that you do through the Ask Office. But also in Math Lab and CS Lab, we expect that tutors, or that students, should be responsible for their learning. Normally in a normal semester, we're passing out brochures to students, and these are the guidelines that are usually on those brochures. We're not passing out brochures this year, but this is the statements that we put on there. You are responsible for your own learning. I like to remind tutors of that. I think you guys are all usually very conscientious students. So sometimes you almost take it upon yourself. It's like their success is your responsibility. That's not true. Their success is their responsibility. So sometimes you just need to remind yourself of that. And remember that it's on their shoulders, that it's not up to you for them to succeed, but you need to remind the student of that as well and tell them that they need to be working hard, that they're gonna make more out of your time together if they come having tried it themselves and worked on it ahead of time. In particular, if you have an individual link up, make sure that they're spending some time ahead of when they see you, then your time together will be much more fruitful. Okay, next one's attitudes. So attitudes are important. Students are going to come to us with a variety of attitudes. You know that just from being in math and CS classes, by looking at it around at some of your peers, especially in some of the introductory classes. There are going to be people there with all different types of attitudes. Some who just love math and CS and isn't this the best thing in the world? And others are going to be, oh man, this is something that I got to check off. It is something that I really am scared about. It's something I have anxiety about. You're going to get the full spectrum. So I guess it again comes down to this centering principle here at the beginning, that you are there to really serve and help the body of Christ. So kind of have that attitude and have that humility, that understanding that you are there to serve, and it's going to make a really big difference to the student. They will really get that and see that in you. If you're not coming across as I'm the big math know-it-all and you're going to learn from me, but more I'm coming at this with you and I really want to help you. Students will really appreciate that type of humble servant attitude that you take into math lab or CS lab each time. So this next one is kind of similar to that, to be humble and to serve, to connect with the student, let them know you're a real person. I had a hard time one time with where this one link up between an individual student and a tutor just was not working. And it was really just because the student had just kind of this almost awe of the tutor, like they were kind of up here. And it was like, wow, they're just so beyond me. And sometimes when I hear that about teaching, it's like that person's just too smart. So that's why I can't understand it. That's not good teaching, and that's not good tutoring as well. You should be coming to where the student is at. So you may be really smart, but you're not a very good tutor if you can't come down to where the student is at and connect with them. So connect with the student, try to have kind of a fun environment where you might even spend a little bit of time, especially in an individual link up, connecting with them and finding out, hey, where do you live? What are you doing? What else are you taking this semester? So you just kind of make them relax and connect with you. I've also seen this happen in math lab or CS lab where people kind of relax, and especially in a class like stats or something like that, where it might not be their first choice of a class, and they're like, well, I don't really want to be here. Having a tutor who's really just kind of having a good, environment and a fun place to be makes the learning actually happen because they're enjoying being together. So connect with them. This next one, handling negative comments. This one is going to happen. You are their peers, which sometimes is really good because they're going to listen to you. They know you've been through the courses and you've got some good tips. They're going to learn from you really well. But this is also going to mean that their guard is going to come down. They're going to start talking with you. They might start bad mouthing a class or a prof. And this is super easy for you to maybe jump on the bandwagon, especially if you had that course. None of you have me for Calc 2 because I've been on sabbatical and haven't taught it for a while, but I can usually say to somebody, oh, so-and-so Grace Cole, you know, she had me for Calc 2. So she might say, oh, I know, you know, when they come in, and they're going to come in this spring because I'm going to teach it again then, and say, man, can you believe that Conrad, she has these hard projects and so much homework and all this kind of stuff. And you might be like, oh, I know, I remember that. And it really was terrible. We don't want you ever to jump on a bandwagon and speak negatively about a class or a professor. So try to always be positive about things. You might empathize with them about workload, like say, yeah, that was a really tough class, but I really learned a lot, and you will too. Come on, let's get into it, you know? And so that's kind of this next step is to speak positively about it, but then direct them back to the material. So try to kind of redirect things back to the material, get back engaged. Okay, yes, we know this is a hard class, but we're going to roll up our sleeves and do it. And here we go. And direct back. You may have a time, and we've had this happen sometimes, where there really is an issue in a class. First step with that is refer them to the instructor if they have issues. Sometimes the prof isn't even aware that that's going on in the class. So tell them, hey, I know Prof. Conrad, she'd probably really love to hear about that. Why don't you talk with her about that going on in the course? And so refer them back to the prof. If they're getting nowhere with that or really having an issue, I'm also a resource that you can use, or Dr. Gossett is another person that you can reach for any kind of persistent problems that may be there. But try to redirect back to the material and get off of negative comments. If you really, I'm not going to show it, I guess, but if you want to, you can look at this video later, the attitude video that some tutors made. It's only about a minute, so you can look at it later. Okay, and then just be positive. I don't know if you remember, does anybody, this is always my big question. I can't see all of you right now because I've got you to the side, but speak up, unmute yourself if you happen to remember what the last tutor interview question that I had on the tutor interview with you was.
Was it asking about what was hard about some of your classes? Or was
that was in
earlier?
there. Okay. That was earlier. Yep. That's good though, because that's related to something else we're going to talk about. I either just freaked you out in that interview, or it's so long ago, so much has happened. You don't remember. It was, what did you like about the courses you would like to tutor in? Okay, why do I ask that? Because I like to see that every single one of you lit up then and you said, wow, you know, it was really interesting about this, or I just love programming, or I just love math because you can get an answer. I hear that one a lot. Or man, the applications here are really starting to get exciting. I can see how this is really going to be used, and I'm excited about whatever, like Grace Cole's one of our tutors. I'm writing a reference for her right now, and I see that she's looking at internships with using physics and medicine, you know, so it's like, wow, I'm getting to the point where I can put these things together. So that kind of enthusiasm we really want to see in you tutors, because that can be contagious. And if you've come to lab and been around a contagious tutor, you know what that's like. So we encourage you to just get excited. Be your own excited, nerdy self about math or CS. That's actually really great. And from our survey results and things like that, students really appreciate that. And that really does help to carry them. So be positive in all of that you're doing. Help them to remember some of the relevance of what they're doing and see the big picture when they maybe get frustrated and in the weeds with some of the things. Okay, this last big section here, I call kind of the session. The session is going to be formal if you're working one-on-one with students. That's what your session is, your session with a student. A session's kind of informal in a math lab or CS lab setting, because you might get these little snippets, you know, like for CS lab tutoring right now, it's all virtual and they're in these breakout rooms often, and so you might be jumping around from student to student. So you might have snippets. So it won't be kind of as formal, but you're going to try to do and put in some of these things or some of these ideas into everything that you do. So this first one, review, you'll do a lot more formally if you have an individual link up. And I call it kind of the bookends of the session. And again, you can do this more formally if you're working one-on-one with a student. I can see Ben there right at the top, so I could pick on him and say, hey, Ben, you know, here we are back to tutoring. I'll pick something that you've all had. Pre-calc, we're in pre-calc now. And we've been working through different kinds of functions. And I remember, you know, you did linear functions last time, and this time it looks like you're doing exponential functions. And so linear functions, remember, they were things like y equals mx plus b. We had a few other equations for that. Exponential are going to grow a lot more quickly. And so we're going to look at exponential functions today. That's kind of my beginning review. How long did that take me? Maybe 30 seconds, if that. But what did that do for the student? It kind of gave them a context, some scaffolding. It helped them to understand where that topic fits in. So you can for sure do that with individual tutoring because the student needs that, but try to do that even in Math Lab and CS Lab to try to kind of put the context of where does this fit into what we're talking about so that the student can understand that. The review at the end would be to pull it out of the student and I'd say, okay, Ben, what are the two types of functions that you've learned about, the big kind of family of functions?
Linear and exponential.
Great. And then I'd say, okay, for linear, what was one example of an equation that we could use for linear equations?
Point slope form.
Yay. Do you remember what that was?
Y1 minus Y0 is equal to the rest of it.
X minus X0. Great. Remember, if you just rearrange the slope, M equals change in Y over change in X, we got to that? Remember, that's how we remember that one? Okay, and then what was the other big family of function that we did today?
Exponential.
Sorry, I'm picking on you. Very good. So we said, you know, that where was the growth? So where was the variable? Since it's called exponential functions, it's probably in the...
I guess it'd probably be in the exponent.
Very good. So we had things like e to the x or b to the x, where the base was a number and we went to the x. So those were exponential functions. Great, you got it. And then you might go on to a couple other things, you know, that you picked up. But notice there that I'm trying not to give him the whole thing, but pull it out of him and see what he remembers. But that, again, we didn't take too much time, but it helped people kind of get into the context of what did I just do today? Because sometimes you're going to get into the weeds with a lot of details. So if you can step back and help the student try to place that knowledge that they just learned into that bigger picture of everything, that will be very helpful. So try for sure do that with individual tutoring. Try to do that with Math Lab or CS Lab. And again, we've heard some good feedback from students that I'm always surprised, and it just makes me even more proud of our students that they say things like, I'm really glad that the tutors don't just worry about us getting our homework done, but they help us to kind of understand the whole thing. So they appreciate some of that where you're helping them to gain the understanding as well. Okay, I'm stopping. You don't have to worry anymore, Ben. I won't pick on you. Check work, don't do it. This one's super hard. I know that it's easiest for tutoring to just jump in and do a problem for a student. And sometimes you're going to have to do this. Try as much as you can not to do the assigned problem or the programming piece that they're talking about. You will want to step back and more just look with words to try to talk generally about what you are trying to do and what the logic is. But as much as you can, try to pull it out of the student, because why? Then it's going to make sense to them. I'm so much older than you, so this would have to be like your grandparents, but for my parents, every time I almost talk with them, they always have the latest technology question. Do any of you have grandparents like this? Like my daughter, she calls me up every once in a while. She's like, oh man, grandpa called me again. I had to FaceTime with him to get the Uber app on his phone for, getting home from the airport, and stuff like that. And so like with my parents, I would set up these things on their computer and do it for them. And then a month later, they'd be saying to me, now, how do I find my pictures and where are they and what happened? And I kind of recognize, why was that? Because I did it for them. It didn't really become real to them. They didn't really understand that. What would have been better and what have I tried to do since then? Sit them down at the computer and say, okay, you're going to make a folder now, and so they'd be like, what is a folder? And then I'd see, oh, they don't know how to make a folder. They don't even know what a folder is. Or right click on your mouse. How do I do that? So same thing with Math or CS. If you just get in there and kind of do it all, you are not going to know where they had the problems. So as much as you can, have them in the driver's seat, have them sitting there kind of leading you through the problem and through the program, and you try to pull them through that and lead them through that as much as you can. It's almost like holding your hands behind your back and then just talking them through the whole thing. So again, I know that's super hard. My kids used to come to me at like 10 o'clock at night and ask questions on their math homework. And I would be guilty of this because I wanted to go to bed, right? I would almost just sit down there, well, this is how you do it, right? But try not to do that as much as you can. Try to restrain yourself and pull as much as you can, because then you're going to find out, oh, they really didn't understand this first concept that they needed in order to get to this next place. Explain concepts, nurture understanding. Sometimes they want to get it done, but slow them down. Ask questions to see where they're at, and they really will appreciate this. So you are going to have some people who are just wanting to come in and get it done. And I would say balance this with the person who really does know what they're doing and does want to just get a check of their work. We've sometimes had tutors that are so into this, I'm going to nurture your understanding, that they really bug a student that's coming in. So again, remember, you're going to have all different kinds of students that are coming into Math Lab and CS Lab. There's going to be some people that really are sharp and they understand it completely, and they just want to know, did I get to this right place? Serve that student well also. Assess where they're at. You don't have to lead that person through every single detail, but the other student who's struggling, that's the one that you're going to want to slow down and make sure that they're understanding what they're doing. In fact, I just talked with Dr. Auk yesterday about a student, and he was saying, wow, we always saw just the answers on their sheet. I don't think this kid knew what they were doing. I think they were just copying answers from some answer key. That's the person that you'd want to slow down if you see no work on their page and see, are you really understanding what you're doing here? Or all of a sudden this programming construct that they Googled, is sitting here and they don't have a clue what they're doing. That's the person you're going to want to slow down. So assess where the student is at, and the ones you need to slow them down. Usually you can get them to kind of slow down if you say, you're going to really have to understand this for the exam. Usually that'll kind of wake them up and be like, oh yeah, okay, let's slow down and learn what's going on here. Model your skills, yet be open to different methods of learning. This is something that you've heard about because, it's kind of a big thing these days, talking about different learning styles. For calculus, we talk about the rule of 4, which is where you try to learn things graphically, algebraically, numerically, and through communication. And kind of the rule of 3 with graphically, numerically, algebraically. Some students are going to resonate more with one of those methods. So start with that and then try to push them towards something else. So if somebody is really visual, start with that. Talk about, like with Ben, I'd be like this. Here's my linear function. And here's my exponential function. It's growing really rapidly. He's visual. He can understand that. Here's this constant rate of growth. Here's this changing rate of growth. Okay, but somebody else who's just like, I don't see things, you're going to have to pivot. So be ready to pivot and understand and kind of figure out how that student best learns. Then this is probably the most important. So if you're fading, if you're tired of listening to me talk, kind of wake up now, pinch yourself. This is kind of, I would say, probably my biggest fear. Even to this day, if I would step foot into math lab or CS lab, there's that kind of little fear. Am I going to be able to help this student? What happens if I get stuck? And see, one of my fears is, am I going to be able to do this while I'm screen sharing with you? Can you see that? Okay, we'll try the video.
Hey guys, I'm starting to get really nervous to help with how to teach students with their project. Sometimes they come in here with questions that I don't know the answers to.
Same. Am archetypes supposed to know everything?
That's totally understandable, and even the best tutors don't always know all the answers. When I first came, I hadn't taken Calc 2, so there were a lot of things I didn't know. But other tutors helped me out, and I was able to ask them questions. So just remember, when you're working with students, never give them a wrong answer. Be honest with them, and help them to model your good study skills. So go back in the book and try and figure things out.
Thanks, Caleb.
Thanks, Caleb.
Okay. Oh, I always hate this. If I can make it stop. Here we go. That was really quick, but they had a lot of important things there. I'm surprised I don't have this anymore on here, but never give a wrong answer. I hope you caught that he said that. Don't fake your way through something. That's the worst thing you can do. What happens, this has happened before. One tutor in my experience in math lab gave the wrong way of doing a certain type of problem. What was going to happen the next day, do you guess, to make this the worst case? There was an exam. And what did that student do? They went back to their dorm, and what did they do? Told their friends how to do it this wrong way. And then they all did it wrong on the exam. So never fake your way through something. Don't give wrong answers. That's the worst thing you can do. Be honest. If you don't understand something, you haven't seen it, you need a little bit of time, that's going to often happen. You're going to need to say, hold on, wait a minute, let's look at this together. And I like to tell a story of the very first semester we had math lab. So it was many years ago. People were trying to figure out who could come to math lab, and the senior econ stats major walked in the door, and I happened to be there. Everybody else kind of was like, whoa, I don't want to help this person. And I'm kind of unusual in the math department. I don't like stats. So of course it's a stats person too. So I've never taken an econ class in my life, and I don't like stats. So, but I sit down with the student and talk with them, and the person sits next to me, they open up their book, they say, okay, I'm on this section, problem number 10. And problem number 10, we look at it and they say, I need to find the heebie-jeeba. I don't remember what it's called. So I say, okay, the heebie-jeeba, is that defined in your textbook? And he's like, yeah, we page back a couple pages. Here's the heebie-jeeba. The heebie-jeeba is equal to the this and the that. What's the this and the that? Oh, that's defined back here. Okay, so now we know we need the this and the that. Can we find that in this problem? We found that in this problem. We used the formula from the book. We solved the problem. The guy thought I was really smart in econ stats. Was I smart in econ stats? Absolutely not. Okay. What was I smart at? Being a good student. You are all good students. Don't forget about all the different resources that you have, and don't forget to do the things that you do when you get stuck. You use what kinds of things? I just gave one of them. What kinds of things do you use when you get stuck? What did I use in that situation?
The book.
Textbook. What else can you use?
Khan Academy.
So lots of different online resources and things. What else?
Other tutors.
Other tutors, great. Anything else? There's one more huge one that you'll know is obvious, but people often forget.
The professor.
The professor is another one.
Notes.
Notes. Thank you. That's a huge one that people forget all the time. And it's interesting because the tutors sometimes will pull out, like I use handouts in my Calc 2 class. They'll say, oh, why don't you pull out your handout from Calc 2? And they're like, oh, look right there. She did an example for you. Let's look at that example together. Or if you pull out those notes, they'll usually have some really good ideas for how you might attack the different problems too. So use all those resources that the student has. I know that's a lot harder. You might have to have them hold things up if you're doing things virtually now, or give you pieces of that, or help talk you through those things. But use all those good study skills that you've developed for yourself and work through those issues together. There's another handout here that has a whole bunch of other things that you can try. So included in that are just even simple things like, what am I given and what do I need to find? That's often a really good thing for math or CS, to even just see, do you know what you're trying to find? That's a really good question for people for starting a program, for example. What are you trying to do here? Okay, and a lot of times they don't even know that. So that's why they can't even start, is because they don't even know what they're trying to find. So what are you given? What are you trying to find? So there's a lot of different things that you can look at in that handout as resources and as also guides for how to work with students. The other thing that I might stress from that handout is to use some really good questions with them that more lead them through the problem instead of asking, do you understand this? What do you think they're going to always say to that? Yeah, and I like, Julia, even how you did it. Not even to say yes, they'll just kind of go, okay. They're always going to say that, so don't ask that for when you're kind of working through this together, and maybe you're both stuck, and you go through this first part and you say, okay, we got to this. We know what we're given. Do you understand what we're trying to find? And they'd say, yes. Don't say that. Say, what are we trying to find? Okay. So ask them questions where they have to verbalize how you're solving the problem together as well. Okay. Oh, I'll maybe just stress this last one as well. Answer keys, use those with care. Be careful with those. Never let a student be looking at an answer key. Always keep those private. If it's an electronic answer key, don't be sharing that with anybody else. If it's a physical answer key, never be leaving that out where a student could be using that on a table as well. Okay, well, I think we made it through all of those concepts. Are there any questions? And Anna, you want to speak up about anything else that I missed or anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think you covered a lot. That was very good. Yeah, I don't know that I have anything else to add, just to emphasize that don't be afraid to reach out to others, to other tutors, to use your resources. And even for that last point too, don't be afraid to ask the student to look over their notes or anything like that as well.
Yeah, that's what tutors always tell me later on, that they learn the most from tutoring. So you guys dive in there, be confident. Know that you're going to learn a lot. You're going to become a lot more excellent at this. And these are great life skills. I just go back again to this reference that I'm going to write for Grace Cole now. She's been tutoring for several years. I always stress that in a recommendation to, she's looking for summer research opportunities, RUIs and NSF grant kind of things. All of this stuff that you do is really important and really helpful, no matter what you end up doing, whether you're an actual like professor someday, or if you're just a researcher or whatever you do, you're going to need to learn to communicate. And so you're going to learn a lot about communicating with others and helping other students, and you might be the person that just helps that person through the class. And so you may play a real pivotal role in helping them get through something that might seem like a huge mountain to them. And your little help in Math Lab with either encouragement or CS Lab with helping them through really kind of getting those aha moments where it starts to click for them might be just the thing that they need to kind of get them to the next step in the path that God has for them. I have a friend who's a physician, and she always says to me, I'd never be a physician today unless you helped me through Calc 1 and 2. You know, and I'm just kind of like, really? You know, she's like, med school was a lot easier than Calc 1 and 2. And I'm like, what? You know, and so you just don't know how you might be impacting somebody and helping them through what might be kind of a crisis moment for them, or a hard class, or even just a hard day that they're having with everything else going on in life these days. So just being an encouragement and being the best tutor that you can, being present and giving it your best will be fruitful and will really help those students, and will glorify God in the process as well. So thank you very much. Appreciate you all carving out this time in this first week of interim. Hope that's going well and that you have a good interim. And then I look forward to some of you who aren't working over in interim in joining us in the spring, where we'll be helping a new group of students. So thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you later. Bye.